Hey there, it's Lindsay, and I want to share with you my keto-friendly chocolate chip cookie recipe. This particular recipe is one that I have come up with and have been able to consistently recreate to Jared's satisfaction. He is usually the person that I am trying to, I don't want to say please, but I'm trying to, please the most with these kinds of recipes. So I had to make sure that it was Jared approved before I shared it with you, and I want to show you this recipe now.
Okay, first things up, let's go ahead and gather what we need. I like to use a hand mixer for this as opposed to like a KitchenAid or something like that because I feel like I can really get to the bottom of my mixing bowl. And I like this recipe just because it's quick and easy for me. And I'm going to start off by creaming some coconut oil. I use about a half cup, and as you can see, I'm getting down to the bottom of my bucket here. Time to reorder. I like to use the refined coconut oil so it doesn't taste as coconutty, but feel free to use butter in place of this or use unrefined that does have more of a coconut flavor. And I'm just trying to get all of the bumps and lumps out of this coconut oil so that it'll smoothly mix with my sweeteners. And I like to keep a dedicated coffee grinder just explicitly for powdering up my sweetener. And I'm using some of my sweet blend. I do have a video showing how I made my sweet blend and my DIY baking blend that I'll be using here in a minute. I will try to remember to link that in the iCards above or in the description of the video. And I know my grinder, it's about a half cup of sweetener, so we are using 1/2 cup of powdered up sweetener. Feel free to buy that already powdered up if you don't want to keep a dedicated tool for making that happen. And then I'm going to use 2 room temperature eggs. I find they incorporate into the coconut oil a lot easier. It doesn't fully incorporate the way that it would into butter, I have found, but it's not enough of a texture issue to be a problem. All right, now I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of vanilla. I tend to eyeball things like extracts, and then about a ½ teaspoon of imitation butter extract. Don't feel like you need to add that. It's not necessary, especially if you're using butter or butter flavored coconut oil. Next up, I'm going to sprinkle about 1/2 teaspoon of pink salt over the top of my batter I have here. And then I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. I like to sprinkle that over the surface as well. And then there's my DIY baking blend. And I'm going to use 1 3/4 cups of my baking blend. Again, I will have a video linked somewhere in the vicinity of this video so you can see the recipe I use to make my DIY baking blend. And then I'm just going to mix this all together until it forms a dough. A lot of recipes will have you mix the dry ingredients separately from the wet ingredients and then blend them together later. I find that to be kind of frustrating to use multiple bowls because I do the dishes around here, so I just kind of go the lazy way out. Feel free to mix them separately if you feel like it's necessary. So we have a nice smoothish dough, and you can use any kind of chocolate chips you want in this that are stevia sweetened or explicitly like low carb. I already had the Bake Believe, I guess is what they are, opened, so I wanted to use those, but I could have used Lily's. You can also mix in some nuts or just various like low carb, sugar-free candy pieces if you'd like. Once everything is well incorporated, I am going to let this dough kind of rest in the refrigerator for maybe an hour or less, just to kind of make sure that it's not going to be too difficult to work with later. I'm also going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees, and then I'm going to scoop out my dough onto my cookie sheet. You don't need to worry about these spreading out very much, so you can kind of place these closer together if you want to. And for me personally, I prefer to flatten each of these cookies out and shape them in order to kind of get them an even thickness so they bake evenly and I don't wind up with kind of crispy burnt edges but still like a soft underbaked center, bake them the way that you would most enjoy them, obviously, but also consider how evenly they bake. So these are going to go into the oven for 8 minutes, and then I'm going to slam that onto the counter there so they kind of flatten out, and then let them cool on the counter.
So that's my recipe for some keto-friendly chocolate chip cookies. It took me a while to kind of get the right consistency. I wanted to show you kind of what happens to these cookies if you choose not to flatten them out the way that I showed you. They turn into little like ice cream kind of scoop shapes, and whenever you take them right out of the oven, you can flatten them down like this, but then the tops are kind of broken up a little bit more. So that is an option, but once they have cooled, they will set like this. I personally don't like to eat them this way quite as well as I do when they are flat. So the ones that I actually flatten before putting them in the oven, those just have a better consistency to us, and they just feel more like traditional chocolate chip cookies. They won't spread because keto-friendly flours or low-carb flours, those won't spread the same way that traditional white flour or traditional wheat flour will spread. So going through and kind of shaping them the way you want them to be really does help. It's the same way with cakes and things like that. Whenever you're doing alternative baking, they don't smooth out, like for cakes and brownies and things, the way that normal all-purpose flour would. So that is one tip that I highly recommend. I also recommend underbaking these in the beginning and just kind of tacking on a minute as needed, just so that you don't wind up with a crispy cookie unless you're actually going for a crispy cookie. But whenever you're baking with almond flour, which my baking blend does have in it, the baked product can usually burn more easily and more quickly than when you're using traditional flours or not using almond meal in your baking blend. So be alert for that, and that's all I think I have to share with you today. I'm gonna go drink a cup of coffee and have a cookie. And I will see you in my next video. I'm not gonna lie and tell you I haven't been eating some of these for breakfast, and that might be the reason why I have had to make 3 batches since I first filmed this recipe. Problems.